Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Hangar Talk podcast. This week on the show, we sit down with former United States Air Force F-16 pilot, airshow pilot, and Folds of Honor mission supporter Ed Hamill to discuss all things aviation related, including the mission of Folds of Honor, his aerobatic routine in his Pitts S-2C Folds of Honor biplane, his time in the United States Air Force flying F-16s and other aircraft. So, we hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode of the Hangar Talk podcast. Thank you so much, Ed, for coming on the podcast and chatting with us. We hope you guys enjoy this week's episode, and we'll talk to you on the back end. Hello, Ed, and welcome to Hangar Talk.
Hey, Braden. Finally got it squared away.
It's all good, sir. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. So, everybody, this is Ed Hamill, a former United States Air Force F-16 fighter pilot and a airshow pilot, and also a supporter of the Folds of Honor mission.
You got it.
So let's start with you, sir. How did you get into aviation?
My grandfather was a military and a civilian pilot, and so I kind of grew up seeing it. Not a lot, but a little bit. And my dad, we did a lot of family vacations, and we talked about when we were together with my grandfather. We talked about his military and then his civilian career. So in high school, my dad came to me and said, "Hey, I know you want to fly, so let's get our private pilot's licenses together." So that was pretty cool. So in high school, I started taking my ground school and all the training to get my private as soon as I turned 16.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but it was age 14 going to an air show is when I really I knew I wanted to be a fighter pilot. So I kind of knew that that was one of the steps to take and get my private and just see if I liked the whole flying thing, if it was for me. So,
Awesome.
yeah,
And that's what kind of I did too. I went to my first show actually was Miramar.
nice.
Nice.
I'm gonna be there in about 2 weeks.
Awesome. I'm so excited to see you. Yeah, I saw you at March Air Reserve Base
Hmm.
last year for SoCal. It was really fun to watch you for the
Thanks.
first time.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to getting back next April.
Oh, awesome. They invited you back. That's cool.
Yeah, the invite is out. We're talking. It's not 100%, but I think it's going to happen. I really enjoyed that venue, and the crowds were incredible. And whatever numbers they came up with, and you heard about, they were legit because you were there. You saw how they do the parking on the flight line on either side. So when I was airborne, and I look down at the crowds at air shows, and people ask me how many people do you think are here? You can look at the flight lines, but I look at the parking lots. I look at the cars, and those parking lots were legit full. And it was awesome.
Yeah, that's always a great sign, and it's always a pain to get out of that. Well, Miramar is always the parking like is a pain to get out of.
Yeah, I haven't done Miramar since 2009, but I don't know. I grew up in Orange County, and I went to school at San Diego State.
Oh, wow.
So I was lucky to be at SDSU between 85 and 89. And there was this little movie that some people know about that came out in, I think, 86.
Yep.
And it was like a recruiting tool for not just the Navy, but, being a fighter pilot in general. So when Top Gun came out and I was going to college there, we went to the Miramar O Club every Wednesday night. It was a big recruiting tool for all the services, even though it focuses on the Navy. It was a fun time to be there. So Miramar, I'm really excited to get back to that venue, see the people of San Diego, and just be back in that area.
Yeah, awesome. It's probably my favorite show ever to attend. Huntington Beach, I like that too, so don't get me wrong on
Oh
that.
yeah,
So,
but two totally different vibes, two totally different venues.
yeah.
Um, each really good in their own way, but Miramar, you will always have that connection, and that feeling of the fighter pilot, the Top Gun era, what that did for everybody in aviation. So pretty cool venue.
Yeah, sure is. And speaking of air shows, do you remember your first air show? If so, what was it like?
I do. Um, so I went on when I got my private. Then I had maybe a couple hundred hours. Flew out of Montgomery Field, got my private, took my check ride out of John
Oh,
Wayne Orange
wow.
County Airport, and flew a lot around the Southern California basin. And then when I graduated, got commissioned, I went in the Air Force. So I went off on the Air Force track and did all the military flying. Very fortunate to get an F-16. And fast forward to about 11 years later, and then I got stationed at Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona, F-16 instructor pilot. But I always knew the whole time I was doing my Air Force gig, and I always knew I would come full circle and want to get back into little airplane flying, biplane flying specifically. Why? Because I saw a performer back at El Toro Marine Corps Air Station back when that was open, and I watched one performer fly back then, and so I looked him up, and that was Sean Tucker, Sean D. Tucker, and I looked him up and just about begged him to teach me, how to get in the air show business. And so after a lot of training and mentorship, then my first air show was at Salinas, California, at the California International Air Show in Salinas, and Sean was on the mic, and I flew, and I was up at you start at 800-foot level, and then 500-foot level, and 250 in surface, and those are the different qualifications you get, and you get more experience, and you take evaluations, and you step down in altitude, but you start at 800, maybe sometimes 500, but I was 800-foot card, so that's pretty high at an air show. But you got to get your experience, and he was on the mic, and it was real special. I don't know if anybody remembers anything that I did because you could barely see me at 800 feet. But that's where I flew my first show,
Awesome. That's very,
99.
very, very great story, 99. And speaking of, so how long is your teaser performance at like the beginning of shows? Is it 10 minutes or
It's
is it?
really it's the teaser is a chance for me as a performer to go up and practice and get some G in my body and make sure the airplane's running good, the whole system, make sure it's good. So that each show, sometimes they'll give you a couple minutes, sometimes they'll give you more. I don't need any more than about 7 or 8 minutes. My full show is only 9 minutes. So a lot of times, what air shows will do is they'll ask a performer to circle the jumper. With a lot of times we'll have the jumper with the American flag, or just a jumper come down and kind of open the show, parachute, sky jumper, whatever you want to call them. And they'll jump out of the airplane. I'll circle them with smoke. Uh, Most likely, it's going to be the national anthem, and then I'll disappear for a minute or two. And then once the jumpers clear the flight line area, and the air boss will clear me in, and it's really just random maneuvers. I'm just warming up. It's like going to the driving range before you play golf. And sometimes it's literally one pass, and sometimes it's a full 5 minutes. So if I don't do that, then I will try to go fly sometime before the brief, or even at the beginning of the show, I'll take off and go disappear and get the same thing done. Just get a practice flight done.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. Little show for the people not attending. So,
Yeah, or as they're coming in, but really that show is all for just us to kind of kick the show off. So we are doing it for the show, but we're also taking an opportunity to warm up. And sometimes if there's another performer that I'm familiar with, then we'll do a teaser, or we'll fly at the same time, and they'll usually call it a squirrel cage. Even though I do go by Hamster, and that has nothing to do with the name squirrel cage, but I've been Hamster since '94, and that's just the name, and I've embraced it, and it's all good. So yeah, and that is really fun when you get two airplanes at the same time. And we'll do that sometimes. It'll be follow the leader. Hey, dive in, just stay behind me, you deconflict. And whether it's we're doing half Cubans, loops, or we'll literally separate the airspace front and back and say, this is my lane, this is your lane. And then we'll go back and forth in front of the crowd at the same time. And we're just picking maneuvers, but we're just staying in our lane and deconflicting. And we'll do that for 2 3 minutes. And that's real. Crowds, fans love that because it's something different.
yeah, sure is. And when you're So the narration, is that pre-recorded for
On
shows?
mine, it is. It is. Um, not too many performers have pre-recorded narration. But since the beginning, from 2003 to 2009, I had the Air Force Reserve as a sponsor, and so I worked hand in hand with the recruiters around the great recruiters for the Air Force Reserve around the country, and I helped them raise awareness and generate leads, and ultimately uh, generate recruits and recruit great people for the Air Force Reserve. And so I was very particular on what was being said because I'm there primarily to serve out a contract and produce return on investment and do good things for my sponsor. So I didn't want to depend on possibly a different narrator at each show, as good as they are. I wanted to know exactly what was being said. So my show has always been more about the message than describing the maneuvers that I'm doing. And so I took about 10 years off of flying and I'm back. And I'm only back for the sole reason of my partnership with Folds of Honor. I love the mission. I love what it does for the families, spouses, and the wives and husbands and families of fallen and disabled military and first responders. And so this time when I got back in, it's all about the family. So before I had a very good friend, Air Boss narrator, Larry Strain. He did the narration for my show. We would record it every year. I would update. We would go into a studio and he would record it. This year, my kids, my son David, my daughter Angie, they do the primary narration. And when you hear my show, and you probably heard it in March,
Yes, I
it
did.
it sounds like an infomercial for Folds of Honor, but that's okay. I'm okay with that because I want my aerobatics and the airplane in the air to bring attention to the message and the message of what Folds of Honor does, which is honor their sacrifice and educate their legacy. So what I like to tell people is, at this point in my career, I'm so blessed to have flown for this many years, and I've flown some cool airplanes. I've done some cool stuff. So at this point, I've got nothing to prove, but everything to give back. So I just want to skydance in Folds of Honor biplane and help celebrate the American family. So who better than to do the narration than my son and my daughter? And I'm in there a little bit, but I'd like to think it's a little bit more about them talking about the mission that really. I've gotten a lot of good feedback from that, especially this year, second year doing it, um, and so that really makes it all brings it back to the purpose. So that's why I use pre-recorded narration and music.
That's awesome, and they do an amazing job, and so do you, sir,
Well,
too.
thanks. And the amazing thing is, I used to go into a studio with Larry and record the stuff before, but now with the technology, all that, the entire mixing and everything was all done on this iPhone that I'm doing this live chat with. So it's amazing what you can do just from your phone with your two fat thumbs and mixing and
Yep.
putting everything together. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah. So, is there a favorite maneuver you like to perform in the biplane?
I like, not really. So the answer is not really, but I do have a tumble that's pretty cool. It's the only tumble I do with no smoke. I call it David's tumble. I couldn't even describe to you exactly what the airplane is doing, like if I had a model biplane right now, but I can watch it and I can do it, and it starts and it ends and it goes the same, going on probably 1,000 times or more now. Um, so it's a pretty wild tumble, and I raise it up a little bit, but I just like the challenge of putting all the different maneuvers together. It's like one big energy management challenge, because that's what airshow flying is all about: is maintaining your energy, leaving yourself options, making it look exciting. I don't want it to look like I'm gonna do anything scary. I want it to be enjoyable, but it's the challenge of putting a really good sequence together and presenting the airplane and drawing attention to what you're talking about. That's what's being said in the narration. Um, and so, and that one tumble I do is kind of all over the place, and it's unique just to the biplane. And I figured it out in a um, very cool way. I was out practicing with Sean Tucker, actually. We were doing the Seattle Seafair show. And at the time, we would have to take off out of Boeing Field and go about 20 something miles north to get out from underneath the Class Bravo airspace before we could do aerobatics. So we would fly up, and then we would do our aerobatics in an area that if something happened, there was a place to land. And then we would fly back. And it was probably our third or fourth practice flight of the day. And we would always try to go out together, just mutual support in case something happened. We could help each other out. And I was out there, and I was so tired. I wanted to see what the biplane could do without touching the rudder pedals. So I went into this one maneuver, and I was like, I'm going to keep my feet on the floor and try to get the tail to swing around to get some momentum and not have one wing fight against the other. And that was pretty cool. So I put a lot of time, and I developed that Davis tumble. But I get more feedback at air shows from the low knife edge pass to an outside 180 turnaround and
Oh
back to
yeah,
slow
the
center.
negative G
I
pushover.
get more feedback. I get more people, and especially kids, and they're like, I really like that one maneuver where you were sideways, and then you turned around. Some people appreciate the negative G turn. Some people don't know what I'm doing, but inside the cockpit, I know, I know what I'm
Yep.
doing. Best pushing 4.5 negative, and some days if I don't feel it, I do a knife edge, and then I start it and go, nah, not feeling it today, and I'll just flip it around to a positive and bring it around. Um, but sometimes it's the simplest maneuvers that get the best feedback.
Yeah.
What's
True. One.
uh, what's your favorite maneuver to see at an air show?
I like the inside tumble. That's a pretty cool one.
Okay. Yep. And anything with noise, sometimes that's a good one too.
Yep. Sneak pass from the Blue Angels.
Sneak past Blue Angels, or um, you've got somebody with a prop turned way up, watching the Titan aerobatic team, which used to be the air
Oh,
shell
I've never
team.
seen that. I've never seen them. I gotta see
It's
them.
with all those big radial engines. It's loud, but it's really graceful, and it's a great act to see. And their night show is unbelievable as well. So sometimes the noise alone can really help out. Sometimes you can overdo it with the noise.
Yep.
Like, it was great to see the Harrier all those years, and you see this jet hover and turn and land, and sometimes the noise was a little bit much, but the act was always
Yeah.
spectacular.
Yeah, it was really true 100%. The Harrier was awesome to see, especially in Miramar, where it was hovering and it hovered with the gear up actually and pitched up
Yeah.
and soon back and landed normally. So that was pretty cool.
Yep.
And actually, so when you're flying the aircraft, what is the maximum altitude gain that you're gaining from these maneuvers? And is there a minimum altitude and a minimum airspeed that you have to be for each maneuver so it's safe and not dangerous to come into the maneuver or you're not knowing what altitude? So, is there a minimum altitude and airspeed for your maneuvers?
Um, so the answer really is it depends. There is no absolute number that we use. When we, as airshow pilots and performers, like I mentioned before, we step down in altitude and experience. And so we start 800-foot floor, and then 500 and 250 and surface. And that same built-in safety mechanism is what we use in competition aerobatics as well, which is the best way to get into airshow flying, is to start with competition aerobatics. And you don't need any experience. You can look up your local um, IAC chapter, International Aerobatic Club, and it's part of EAA. And there's local chapters around the country, and they have different altitudes. You start out in primary and sportsman, intermediate, advanced, unlimited level, and each one of those levels, you're able to do your competition aerobatics at a lower level. And that's what we have in the air show business is we have lower levels based on your experience and what rating that you have. And so it takes you a couple years to get down to where you can fly all the way to the surface. So I tell people the lowest I can legally fly is I can do a touch and go during my show. I can actually touch the runway. For me personally, I don't get lower than about 25 to 50 feet. So you could take the airplane all the way down to, inches from the surface and fly down in front of the crowd. But what I've learned over the years and I've seen is that when you get that low, the only people that can see you are the people in the very, very front row. And if that's if they have an unobstructed point of view. And then you can even be one or two layers back, and usually you have to tiptoe as the airplane goes that low. So I typically will do maybe one pass that low, usually upright, not even in knife edge or inverted, because I like options. When it comes to airspeed, there's no specific number on a minimum airspeed, but really the lower you get to the surface, the more speed that I want, because that allows me to push away from the ground, to pitch up if any kind of a problem arises. Excuse me.
It's all good.
But if I do get low and slow, it's going to be over a runway, so that if something happens, I can just quickly level the wings and touch down.
Yep, always good. And
Alt-
safety's
Altitude, yeah, and altitude. No, I don't get higher than about 2,500 feet AGL. Um, So some of the performers come in higher. They start, at a few thousand, and they do a maneuver where they lose a lot of altitude and dive in, which is cool. But I think the majority of the performers in aerobatic airplanes probably don't get higher than about 2,500 to 3,000 feet AGL.
yeah, definitely, and because of the margins and safety,
It's early, sorry.
it's
It's
all
okay.
good.
I got the sore throat.
Uh, oh, sorry to hear that.
Well, just a little cough. I'm not getting sick. It's all good.
Okay. Yeah, so do you live in Phoenix or Glendale?
Well, Glendale's a suburb of Phoenix, so I'm in the northwest corner of the Phoenix Valley. Um, I operate out of Glendale Airport, which is right next to the big football stadium, Cardinal Stadium,
Oh,
and
nice.
only 5 miles away from Luke Air Force Base on the west side, which is where I was stationed for almost 16, 17 years,
Wow.
instructing in the F-16. And yeah, so for Phoenix is a pretty big area from the northwest corner to the southeast corner. It's about an hour and 10-minute drive with no traffic. So it's a
Oh,
big area.
yeah. And I was gonna go to Luke Days this year. I begged to go, but I couldn't this year because hotels there were expensive.
Well, the problem with every time Luke Air Force Base has their Luke days, it's the same time as spring training. And a lot of times it's the same weekend as a NASCAR race that's in town.
Oh,
So we have a big NASCAR track, the Phoenix Raceway, which is about 8 miles south of Luke Air Force Base. So it's a tough time to get hotel rooms.
yeah, and they were like $500 a night or
Oh,
something.
it's crazy. The normal room that's about 130 or 150 a night, they shoot up in price.
Uh,
Uh,
oh
so it,
yeah.
so it's tough.
How was it? Was it a good show?
It was really good this year. Really good crowds. The crowds were the people love the air show, and I was fortunate. Before I got back into flying, I was part of the staff when I was still in the reserve, still part of the leadership staff at Luke, and I was involved in running the last two shows that we actually had, air shows, and then the two shows that we got canceled due to COVID. And the
Oh,
second one, they unfortunately they canceled it, and then literally by the time the show would have happened, all the restrictions were already lifted. So that was very disappointing, not just for the people running it and the base, but for the people of Phoenix, and especially on the west side. Everybody in the community really benefits from the show, and it's a huge community event. So they finally had it this year, and and there's a lot of development around Luke Air Force Base, a lot of commercial development. And so they lost some of their parking lots that they normally had. And it was a little bit of a challenge logistically for them to deal with the crowds because it was more people than before. People were just, you know, they were dying to see it. They were so looking forward to a show. So when they had it, they really had good turnout.
Oh yeah, that was awesome, and hopefully 2026 I'll make it out.
That'd
Fingers
be
crossed.
great. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, and then so when you were in the Air Force, what aircraft did you start off with? Because I know there's like different levels, like T6, T-38.
Hmm.
Did you fly those aircraft?
So I'm old enough that I flew the T-37, which
Oh,
was before the T-6 came online. So I went to pilot training at Wichita Falls Air Force or Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, Texas. It's called Euro NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training, NJEPT, we call it for short. It was a really cool opportunity because I was in pilot training with friends from overseas, all the allied nations, Germany, a couple Brits in our class. Our instructors were a mix of foreign instructors. We had Brits, Turks, German instructors, Italian. It was really cool. And I flew the T-37. So it used to be, previous to the T-6, that everybody would fly the T-37. Are you familiar with that?
yes.
Okay. So for those that aren't, it's a smaller, slower airplane, but it's still a jet. It's still a twin jet engine airplane. Not very fast. You sit side by side. The air conditioning does not work very well. So when we're in Texas in the middle of summer, we are sweating our
Ooh,
rear ends
yeah.
off. Yeah, it's in Texas can get pretty hot, pretty humid. So we did 6 months of that, and then we all went to the T-38, and we flew 6 months in the T-38, and then we have the standard drop. Our class has the assignment night, drop night, and that's all based on where you are ranked and how you're doing in the class. And the one ranked number one gets it. Here's 20 students, and here's 20 assignments, and number one gets to their first choice of what's available, and then they go all the way down the line. And so those are the two airplanes I loved. The T-37 was a really good trainer, nicknamed the Tweet. Super loud and super slow, but it was just cool to fly an airplane that's been a big part of in the history of Air Force pilot training. And it had old round dial gauges. We didn't have anything new with glass panels or GPS where it's very easy to find your way around. So the one of the big challenges when you're just flying with raw data, round dial gauges like VOR and NDBs, is just keeping your situational awareness with where you are and navigating to the next point. Um, it's a little bit easier nowadays with the GPS and the ForeFlight and all the Garmin setups where you can just pick a point and go to a lat long and hit the button and there's an arrow that says go this way. So T-37 was really good. The T-38, which is they're still using that today. Um, the difference nowadays is that you do the first part in the T6 and then and I'm not 100% positive, but I think this is the way they do it. They track you at 6 months down the road. You're going to go fighters, or you're going to go tanker transport or heavy type of airplane. So the ones that go fighters, they go in the T-38, and then if you're going to fly a transport or a tanker, then you're going to go fly in the oh my gosh, I forgot what it's called. It's a little private jet T1. I'm not sure
The
Jayhawk. I
T1
don't know
Jayhawk.
the T1 Jayhawk. So they fly in that. So they track you early, and depending on where you're going to go and what you're going to fly, then you may fly the T-38 or you may go to the T1.
Okay, very interesting to know about. And is there a significant difference in the aircraft, the T1 versus the T-38?
Very significant. So the T1 is just a small corporate type jet, and your mission is transporting or getting ready for someone to fly a heavy is the way, a transport airplane or a tanker. The T-38 is getting you ready to go fly a fighter, F-16, um, A-10 maybe, but the A-10 is kind of going away. F-35. So the T-38 is a supersonic. The T-1 is subsonic. So two completely different worlds, two very different, types of flying.
Awesome and very interesting to know about. And another thing is, what inspired you to join the Air Force and become an F-16 pilot?
I think a little bit of influence of growing up and being around it, or talking to my grandfather about it a little bit. And I think, honestly, the one moment that I just looked up and I go, I think I'm going to do that, is at an air show. And I'm just watching a two ship of F4s fly by. It was actually at the Chicago Air Show, standing on down by Lakeshore Boulevard and somewhere near the beach. And it wasn't even an aerobatic maneuver or anything fancy. It was just a two ship of F4s. They were very loud, and that made an impression. And they flew by. And at that young age, you can change your mind a lot of times. You're not sure what you want to do. Sometimes you don't know what you want to do until you're into high school or into college, or even you're not even in college. You're getting training in a particular trade. You want to be a welder. You want to be an electrician, whatnot. And so I was very fortunate because I was at an air show. I saw the two jets fly by, and I just kind of went, "That looks pretty cool. I think that's what I want to do." So I told my parents that, and they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, that's great. Right? A couple weeks ago, you might have wanted to be a doctor. A couple weeks before that, you said you want to be a cop. You want to be a firefighter." Well, I decided I want to be a fighter pilot, and so I kind of zoomed in on that, and I got very stubborn and very focused. And you learn, you learn very quickly what you want to do, or what you need to do what you want to do down the road. So what I did was, people who are on their way to pilot training, who got a pilot training slot, or they're on their way to flying fighters, and then if you're fortunate enough to meet that person, ask them what they did to get there and write down exactly what they did. I got a degree. Well, do you need it in any particular subject? Nope. I'm going to go be a fighter pilot, and I just got a degree in meteorology. What? I didn't. I thought you had to be an aerospace engineer. Nope. So I got a degree in business. I wasn't smart enough to get an engineering degree. I tried it, and I just wasn't getting the grades that I needed, and I was worried about graduating. So I switched to business and loved it, right? But so that was one of them. And then when you get into school, um, you start checking boxes. Well, this person is on their way to the pilot training that I want to go to, and they joined this society, Arnold Air Society. It's like a fraternity among ROTC cadets. Oh, and they took this class, and they held this leadership position, and they did this extra stuff to help them make it through the classes that they were having a hard time doing. And so that all started back at an air show, is what really, made it very clear in my mind what I wanted to do. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Interesting story, sir, and that's very great. And just want to say thank you for your service too.
Yeah, thanks. It was a blessing and very fortunate. I was very honored to just be a part of the team, um, and so it was a pleasure and an honor, especially to stay in for more than just a couple of years, and for them letting me stay that long. So it's a great time.
He actually met President Bill Clinton.
Okay, awesome. You there?
Yeah, I think my AirPods died or something. I don't know. Can you
Oh,
still hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I'll just take them off.
Okay.
I think the case died or something.
Okay. No problem.
Yeah, sorry about that. So for Miramar, are you gonna fly out from Glendale? What day are you planning on that?
Um, Miramar, for those that aren't familiar, is a unique show because it's a 3-day show for the public. Most shows are Saturday, Sunday. Miramar is open to the public on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so uh, and then we do a rehearsal day. We always have a rehearsal day prior to the show where we basically fly a full lineup, and it's an opportunity for us to practice. Not really, we're rehearsing. Technically, we used to call it practice day, but now it's rehearsal day because the FAA has certain requirements that we have to have certain number of practices before we show up. So that's why you'll hear the term rehearsal day. So we get a chance to get familiar with how that show operates. I have a team member up on the stand that coordinates the start of my music because it's all pre-recorded. So I literally don't start my routine until I know the music and the PA system has started because I start the music in my headphones. So I'm listening to the same pre-recorded music and narration that the crowd is listening to. And that takes a little bit of coordination, and we always have some technical difficulties. Maybe they didn't have the music file, maybe it was corrupted, and I have a team member to make sure that it's all started and communicate with me because there's always little hiccups, and we iron those out on rehearsal day. And so Miramar, not just as a 3 days of public performance on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but they do 2 full days of rehearsal days. So they don't just do the whole lineup start to finish. They separate out the acts between Wednesday and Thursday. So we actually have to bring the airplane to on the base on Tuesday afternoon, um, so that on Wednesday morning we go to the performer briefing and then we're there and ready to go for rehearsal day number one. So I'm actually going to come into town on Monday and cross your fingers. I might be able to do some more media with a local police helicopter unit. We're working on that. If it works out, that's going to be great. I did that in St. Louis over the 4th of July, and I did that in Chicago on August 10 and 11. And I flew with the Metro Air Unit, helicopter unit in St. Louis. And then Chicago, I flew the Chicago PD helicopter, and we went out and got some real good images and video that we put out on social media. And that's just to highlight the fact that Folds of Honor also gives out scholarships to the family members of fallen and disabled first responders as well as military.
That's awesome. Very interesting story to know about. And I saw that picture on Instagram. That was actually really cool with the helicopter and the St. Louis Arc.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, that was great.
awesome.
That was a fun and very interesting media flight. It was a good time.
Yep.
Um, so
And speaking of Miramar, actually, I'm trying to apply for a media credential.
okay.
I did that last year. It was actually really, really fun. However, I did miss the Blue Angels conference because I couldn't find the hangar, which I was annoyed about.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so we got that all resolved, and I was on the flight line. I was there when the Viper demo team started practicing. I heard the Mustang run up. That was,
Yeah.
then it took off. I was to be behind it. That was so cool. And then the Viper demo team took off and did their routine. So it was really nice.
Awesome.
And
Awesome.
I was actually interviewed by ABC 10 News.
Awesome.
Yep.
That's Hey, get the word out.
Yeah, you bet. So where are you? Where's your hangar gonna be for
Uh,
Miramar?
I don't know. I haven't been there since 2009, and I also heard there's going to be a few little bit changes. They're going to have some changes just from last year. There will be some flight line construction that is going on. So,
Oh.
so the information that I got was, hey, for those of you returning from the previous year, get ready. We have airplanes in a different hangar. We're going to be operating out of different areas than you've been operating for the last several shows. Hey, for the new performers, here's where you go. It's going to be new to you, and it'll seem normal because you're not used to. And then I haven't been there since 2009. So the answer is I'm not sure. I don't have a
Okay.
diagram or anything yet.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So back to the Air Force for a minute. So do you remember your first training flight? If so, what was that like?
Well, yeah, they call it your dollar ride. So in the Air Force, the first time you fly, um, you pay $1 to your instructor. and so it's called the Dollar Ride. And I got to be honest, I was really concerned after my first training flight. We talked about the T-37 tweet earlier being hot. Air conditioning's not very good. You're very nervous because you want to do well. You don't want to wash out of the program. I think we had about a 25%, 30% washout rate in our class. And so you just want to do well. So every little misstep or every mistake that you make, you can't let it get you down. You got to just look forward and minimize your mistakes. So my first flight, it's your first flight. It's kind of like it's hard to really screw up. You're brand new, but what really concerned me is it was great and I had fun. We went up and did stuff. It's kind of like your freebie. You're not really going to bust your orientation ride. It's for you to just get used to the environment. But when you put on the flight suit and you put on the harness, which has the parachute, and you sit in the cockpit and you put the helmet on and the mask and the visor, and you strap in, and then you hook up your oxygen hose. By the time you get into that environment, um, it's very easy to get motion sickness and to feel this is not normal. This is uncomfortable. You can't have any kind of feelings of claustrophobia because you're strapped in. The canopy comes down. You're sweating. Just beads of sweat are making it very uncomfortable. So that's what I remember my first flight being. Is just being very worried about, am I going to make it? And then when I got done and we're coming back to land, I did not feel very good. I was, green. I didn't throw up, fortunately. I didn't get sick, but I felt like crap. I wanted to get out of that airplane and I wanted to get my feet back on solid ground and I want to get back into air conditioning. So I'm walking back in and my instructor's like, "Hey, congrats, your first ride. Aren't you excited?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, this is great. I really feel excited." And you just, and then you come back in and you see a lot of your your fellow trainees and you're looking at them across the room and they're giving you this wide-eyed look and you're just going, holy cow, I've worked all my life for this and now I don't know if this is for me. And it's a very nervous, scary feeling. I don't think, and I felt like that for my first three, maybe four flights, sorties, where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get over this. Fortunately I never got sick, but for the ones who did get sick and really did have motion sickness, the flight surgeons really they had really good programs to get you through it. They would have you listen to soothing music, and they didn't necessarily give you any kind of drugs like Dramamine or anything that helps with motion sickness. They had ways to get through it, just with no drugs, and there were techniques, and there were very few people that actually washed out due to motion sickness. You just get over it because you build up a tolerance to it, and then you get used to it. And I think it was my fourth flight where I got out of the jet and I turned around and I looked at the jet and I went, I think I'm ready to jump right back in and do this again right now. And then it was at that point that I go, okay, I think I've got a tolerance for this now. I think I can get over it. And then once you get over that feeling, then you start learning, because until you get, stop worrying about getting sick, you're spending a lot of your brain bites on that. So that's what my first flight was like, was really wondering, and there were some people that didn't make it. Um, and there's some people before I even got in the Air Force that were working towards their private pilot's license. And, you get up on a hot day and it's bumpy and your hot temperature might be affecting and the motion, and some people just never get over it. So the biggest thing you got to remember is it's for some people and not for others, and it has absolutely nothing to do with you as a human being and a person and your potential and what you can do. It might be in aviation, it might not. Maybe it's in a support aspect of aviation. Maybe you'd be the best airport manager we'd ever, have seen. Maybe it's not actually in the airplane flying, and that's cool. That's okay. But that's what all that stuff was going through my mind, because I had flown a couple hundred hours before I got to pilot training, and I had like a couple hours of aerobatics. Those were fine, but I had a lot. I had like 200 hours, a little bit more. I flew out of Montgomery Field in an aero club in a Piper Dakota. It's just like a Piper Archer Warrior, but it's just got a little bit more horsepower. And I did a lot of flying there, and that helps you a little bit, with the motion sickness. You just build up a tolerance to it,
Yep.
and helps you get over it. And it lets you know if you get some flight time privately, at least you have a little bit of a knack for flying. This is, hey, I like it or I don't. I can do it or I just can't. Even though you get in the Air Force in the T-37 or the T-6, and it's completely different environment, completely different airplane. In the back of your noggin, though, you have a little bit of that confidence that, well, I know I've done this in another type of airplane, so that can help you out. But that all goes through my head on my first training flight in the Air Force.
Awesome. That's a very great story. Really interesting to hear about. And I really like that story because I've gotten sick too on aircraft, but I haven't thrown up. I My first ever flight in a Cessna 150, I actually flew the aircraft and I around the pattern of Chino Airport in Chino, California.
Hmm.
I got air nauseous, but I didn't throw up, but I got taught like you'll get more used to it and over time, so
Yep, exactly. It's just like running a marathon or a long distance race. You can't do it overnight. You have to build up to it.
yep,
And
exactly.
and sometimes feeling nauseous and not getting sick is actually worse than than actually getting sick.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better just to get it over with. Yeah, for those that do have a little bit of motion sickness, just realize that you can go to your AME, your aeromedical examiner, where you get your FAA medical, and you can ask them about it, and they'll refer you to different programs that can help you get over that motion sickness. So there's some really good programs to get through it.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for that. And another question, do you have any family members that served in the military?
Uh, I don't have any immediate family members, but I did mention that my grandfather was in the military before. He flew C-47s,
Oh,
DC-3s,
wow.
and, and he was also in what they used to call the ferrying command, and he delivered airplanes all over the world, right out of the LA Basin area. I'm not sure wherever they would had the factories that built the airplanes, and he would deliver airplanes. So he did get a chance to fly everything from fighters to tankers. Um, but for mission, but he was primarily a C-47 mission pilot, and he was actually one of the pilots that flew over the hump in China. All group pilots, they flew over this was a stretch of very rough terrain where there was no place to land. So if you have any kind of an engine or an airplane issue, there was just no place to land. But they transported a lot of refugees. And so if you can do a search for it. The hump in China, it was pretty elite group of individuals. So he had a lot of experience and a lot of cool stuff to look through as a kid. A lot of memorabilia and old maps and pictures and uniforms. And that definitely had an influence on me going to the military. And then he got out and then got a corporate job. And so I flew for a man named Mr. Simplot in Idaho, Mr. J.R. Simplot. And he um, was a big potato grower. And then he branched off into a lot of other divisions of business, like fertilizing. Eventually, he was a main investor into Micron, um, and that's based right there in Boise. And so the Simplot family is very involved in the state of Idaho, and my grandfather was J.R. Simplot's corporate pilot for a lot of years. And then the, my grandmother was also a pilot,
Oh.
and she was one of the original 99s.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
So she was one of the original, and that 99s were an all female group of pilots. And so they would both fly around to visit families, and they had a Cessna 310R. So they had a twin engine Cessna, and they flew that around the country and visited family and took trips in it. So at an early age, I would go to the airport, the local airport, because Gramps and Grandpa were flying in on their Cessna. So we would go to the airport and wait, and they'd land and taxi in. And so I had a very early exposure to general aviation and how cool just the ability to fly around the country on your own, which is the coolest part about general aviation.
Yeah, sure is. It's very great. Oh, Emil Tucson says my dad flew over it in a B-25.
Oh, okay, cool. And the hump in China, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And next question for you is, what is the best aviation advice you've ever received?
Um,
He says he didn't enjoy the ride.
yeah, no, no, no. My grandfather did not. He had a lot of stories, but flying the hump in China, the stories weren't that great as far as they weren't happy stories. They were always something that was sad that happened. But he never had an issue. Like he never had a near mechanical problem. But the people that they flew were so grateful, and they never wanted to get the airplane dirty by getting sick or you know stuff like that. Anyways, the best
Yeah, back to that.
aviation, the best aviation advice I heard early on. You probably heard this one. Everyone's heard this one. There are old pilots and there are bold pilots, but there's not very many old, bold
Yep.
pilots.
Yep.
So, I guess the best advice I've always gotten is the safety always needs to be the priority um, at the top, no matter what. You, as an air show performer, entertainment can never be higher than safety. I get it. We're stunt pilots. Yeah, you can call air show pilots what you want, daredevils, but safety always has to be at the top, and that's no matter what you're flying. In the Air Force, your mission is combat, and sometimes that's the only exception, where something that's going to save lives might be a priority. You might have to take that chance and check safety to the side and do what's right for the mission. Um, but yeah, the other thing I've gotten as far as advice is your ego just needs to always be checked at the door when you go in and brief up a flight and you fly and then you debrief. The rank comes off, is the way we say it in the military. The ego needs to get chucked at the door. So never fly like you have something to prove. We're all trying to prove something in some way. We're all trying to get to that goal. I'm trying to prove that I'm good enough to do this, and I'm trying to reach this goal. But when it comes to the actual flying, integrity and wingman responsibilities and leader responsibilities, and never letting your ego get in the way of what you're doing in the airplane. Somebody told me that early on, especially in Air Force training, is just never let your ego get in the way of what you need to do the right thing. And that you see. I just flew my airplane home from Chicago, and I hopped across the country and landed at different airports. And when I was in the military, it was the same way. But whenever you get with a group of people that do what you do, there's an instant camaraderie. It's so cool. You can land at an airport, not know anybody, but you roll up in your airplane and you ask, "Do you got any hangar space and where can I get some fuel?" And it seems like somebody that just met you for the first time. They're a pilot, you're a pilot, you have this bond, and they instantly drop everything and help you. In
Got
other
it.
words, in other words, they set their ego to the side and they just go, "What do you need? How can I help?" And it's a bond that we all have in the aviation community that's very, very cool. So that's probably the best advice that I got early. Is you can be however you want to be, but when you brief that mission and you're flying that mission, you debrief that mission and what you're doing. Leave the ego at the door and bring your airmanship.
Yep,
to
one
what you're
hundred
doing.
percent. And I don't know if you know him, but Chuck
Yep,
Coleman.
I know Chuck.
I had him on. He told me keep your ego in check.
Yep. Yeah, that's a big thing. And if we in the community start seeing that, then it's your responsibility to say something to that individual and to say, "Hey, I may be wrong, um, but this is what I'm seeing, and maybe I'm putting our friendship at risk here. Maybe you're gonna not like me or tell me to get out of my face, but the right thing to do is to address it because that's what we do in aviation communities. We look out for each other because it's the right thing to do.
Yep.
So sometimes it's tough. Sometimes it's tough to say something because it's like the other thing is I learned this in airline flying when I started because I was a single seat fighter guy, and now I jump into uh, a crew concept where we still have the crew concept in flying fighters because we always flew in two ships or four ships. But when you're in the same cockpit, and I'm not sure if the other pilot in the cockpit is doing something that's right, I learned early on that I never tell that person that you're wrong and I'm right. I always try to find it somewhere in a regulation that I think that they're not following. And I open up that regulation and I say, I'm not sure, I may be wrong, but there's this regulation that I think that we're not following. And maybe there's some exception, but help me understand how we're able to do what you want to do. But it appears that it's not what we're supposed to do. And then you're using a regulation to tell that person that they may be doing it wrong, not you. And also, I had several instances in the airline where I would bring that up and go, "Hey, I'm not sure our minimums for this approach. I thought were here." And then the person I'm flying with says, "Oh, did you not see the special bulletin that just came out 2 weeks ago? It's right here. It says we have an exception to this rule." And I go, "No, I didn't see that. Thanks for bringing that to my attention." And then it's a whole different way of solving that potential misunderstanding or problem where I'm not saying, you're wrong, I'm right, you're screwing up, how dare you do that? What I'm saying is, hey, help me to understand. And you're letting a book correct that person and not you. And it really goes a long way in trying to solve problems in any kind of aviation environment. Just try to refer to help them understand something like a regulation or a guidance or any kind of standard operating procedure that you or the way you follow a checklist, anything like that that might help you get through that kind of a situation.
Awesome. That's great advice too, and that was probably great, sir. And thank you for telling that. And next question is, what is the best advice you can give to aspiring aviators like myself who want to pursue a career in aviation?
Find somebody who's doing what you want to do, find out what they did, make a list, put little squares next to each thing that they did, and then make it your to-do list and put it up on the wall, and then start checking off the boxes. That's
Awesome.
probably the best way. In other words, don't reinvent the wheel. Ask for help and advice from somebody else, and maybe get their roadmap and how they achieved, and they got other goals. And if you don't know what that big goal is, then go do something uh, and fill a bunch of small goals. Like, I don't know what I want to do yet. Fine, go get a good job as a aircraft fueler at an FBO at an airport, and then say for the next 3 months, I'm showing up to work on time, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to hopefully figure out what I want to do. And the
Yep.
and filling those small goals, and all of a sudden one day you're going to wake up, you're going to see the right airplane flying by, you're going to meet the right person that may be working in the industry that you end up being in, and all of a sudden you're going to wake up and go, that's what I want to do. It just won't happen overnight, and you can't force it. So set small goals along the way, and then just reach those goals, realizing I don't know what my big goal is yet. But if you do, then that makes it easy. Go find somebody that's doing what you want to do and ask them what they did, and then make that your to-do list.
Yep. And they thank you for that advice too, and I'm sure people would appreciate that.
Yeah, it worked for me.
Yep, sure did. And what is where can viewers go to learn more about your performances and other aviation
So
adventures?
I've got my website, edhamill.com. It's edhamill.com. And that's more of it's more of a business card placeholder. It's got some information about me, a little bit of bio information, my schedule. I've been starting to put a lot more stuff on Instagram. And so Flatstick. So Ed Hamill, and then the name of my LLC is Flatstick because that's the favorite club in my golf bag is my putter. So I putt from all over the place. So Flatstick. And if you want to learn more about Folds of Honor, which I highly recommend, go to foldsofhonor.org. And even the smallest of donations can make a difference. They have a program called the Squadron, which is $13 a month, and you can just sign up and pay 13 bucks a month, and that adds up. And since 2007, Folds of Honor has given out over 51,000 scholarships worth 240 million. Last year, they gave 39 million in scholarships just in 1 year, and this year they're projected to give $51 million worth of scholarships. So really great organization and near and dear to my heart because I have friends who are either killed in action or disabled, and their families have applied for scholarships and gotten them. So it's benefited people that I personally know. So great organization. So go to foldsofhonor.org and at least get some information, learn about it, or you can make a one-time donation or a regular donation and join the squadron.
Awesome. That's great advice, and I'll definitely do that. I'm unfortunately kind of broke right now,
That's
so hopefully I'll get
okay.
some.
Just spread the word.
Yep,
Yeah,
we'll do.
spread the word.
Now, anybody else have questions for Ed here? Cause gotta he's watching that. So.
Be humble. Absolutely.
Yep, 100%. So, are you gonna? Excellent interview. Glad I can make it to this one. Thanks, guys. Hey, no problem, Ben.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Uh,
Awesome. Thanks for listening.
that's my buddy Ben Johnson. He's a photographer and he lives up in Utah, so
Okay.
he's pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, if anybody doesn't have any questions, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you so much, Ed, for coming on the podcast, sir.
Yeah. Thanks, Braden. Appreciate it. You're doing great stuff. Keep it up and keep in touch. And I hope to see you at Miramar.
Yep, I will be at Miramar this year. I'll let you know. I'll message you if I get my request approved, and we can work something out. So I'm
Okay.
so excited to see you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right, take care, Ed. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye bye. Thanks.